Get up to the right page. Okay. It is now 1 o'clock on February 3rd. So welcome to this afternoon's Incorporation Review Board meeting. Just making sure I can be heard. This is going to be the first of two for the potential incorporation of the Town of Campbell as the Village of French Island. We will work through the agenda that is posted to our news website and is up on your screen. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our Municipal Boundary Review webpage in the coming days. We ask that you remain muted until you speak so we don't have background noise. Feel free to raise your hand or use the chat feature to ask questions. During the public comment portion of the meeting, members of the public may pose questions in the chat to the Incorporation Review Board, and the staff or I will read those questions, and we will be limiting those public comments to 3 minutes. So before we begin, we're going to start with introductions, which will also serve as our roll call for the Incorporation Review Board. But I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Dawn Vick. I'm with the Wisconsin Department of Administration, and I serve as the Division Administrator of the Division of Intergovernmental Relations and also the Chair of the Incorporation Review Board. Bill, would you be able to unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Bill Gearing. I'm chairman of the town of Sherman and Sheboygan County and a Towns Association appointed member to the review board.
Thank you, Bill. Tom, would you be able to unmute and introduce yourself?
I'm Tom Mathias. I'm on the town board of the town of Verona in Dane County and appointed by the Dane County Towns Association.
Thank you, Tom. Mayor Nichols.
I don't believe he has shown up quite yet.
Okay, we will move on to Kurt.
Oh, this is unable to unmute.
See that.
Mayor Nichols is unable to unmute. I'm not sure if Kurt Witensky is here, but let me just troubleshoot that, and I have to find Justin.
Right, Kurt, if you are here.
I'm here.
You,
Kurt Witensky, former legal counsel and lobbyist for the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Brad, I'm going to move on to the other things if you still want to work on Mayor Nichols for a minute.
Justin is able to speak now.
I am.
Mayor
Thank
Nichols.
you. I appreciate you letting me speak. Justin Nichols, I'm the mayor of the city of Manitowoc. I represent the League of Wisconsin Municipalities.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, so that is the Incorporation Review Board and its members. So thank you very much, board members. Would the petitioner and the representatives of the town please introduce themselves? Stan?
Yeah, I'm Stan Riffle. You've seen me before. I represent the town of Campbell, soon to be Village of French Island.
Thank you. Bill Forrest?
Bill should be able to.
Bill, if you are not able to unmute, I'm going to go to Mr. Kapanke. So, Town of Campbell, are you able to unmute and introduce yourselves? This is kind of our time for troubleshooting these problems too, these introductions.
I'm going to allow everybody to use their mic. So if you're not, please just be mindful of this to stay muted unless you're speaking during the public comment period, since the allowing permissions individually is not working. I'm sorry.
Oh, Mr. Kapanke or Bill Forrest?
Yeah, Dawn, can you hear me? This is Bill Forrest.
Bill, I hear you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm with the Forrest and Associates planning consulting firm and advisor to the French Island Incorporation.
Okay, thank you. Town of Campbell, I think I see you there.
Dan Kavanke, Town Chair.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Don.
And
All
Lee
right, so-
Donahue, Town Supervisor.
Excellent. Anyone else? Okay. So that would be the town interveners. Would you care to introduce yourself, Mr. Smith?
I'm Jared Walker Smith, and I'm joined here with Lori Kupsa, and we're special counsel to the city of La Crosse. And in the room, we're also joined by, going around the room, Ellen Atterbury, Assistant City Attorney, Krista Gallagher, Deputy City Attorney, Matthew Gallagher, Director of Engineering and Public Works, and Eric Granum, Principal and Founder at Trilogy Consulting LLC.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is the petitioners and the interveners. Before we move on, we are going to do some Incorporation Review Board business, which means we need to approve the meeting minutes from the last Incorporation Review Board, which was in April of 2023. So I need the motion to approve the minutes from the April 25th, 2023 meeting where we discussed the final determination for Rib Mountain. I'll entertain a motion and a second from the board, please.
I would move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Bill. Is there a second?
Second. Matthias.
Thank you. Any discussion on those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from April 25th, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, thank you. Those minutes are approved. So now we are going to get into the meat of this meeting, which is the discussion of the proposed Town of Campbell as the Village of French Island and their incorporation petition. We are progressing with the Incorporation Review Board's consideration of the Town of Campbell's petition for incorporation as the Village of French Island. Prior to the next board meeting, a draft determination and findings document will be prepared. Board members will review the draft determination and its finding, then reconvene at a second board meeting to discuss and make a recommendation to the chair on the draft document. The second meeting will be virtual, just like this one. Today's meeting, the purpose of today's meeting is for the board to analyze and discuss how the petition is related to each of the required statutory standards. And as you can see from the agenda, our discussion today will be organized around these statutory standards. So for each standard, we will hear staff's analysis, and the board members can add their comments and ask questions to the staff. And they may have questions also for the petitioners or the interveners about what they're hearing regarding these statutory standards. Just remind everyone, the board's not making a decision today. We're just discussing how the petition relates to these statutory standards and how the staff is evaluating those standards with the petition so far. Petitioners, at the conclusion of each standard, you may provide comments. So I'll be calling to say, petitioners, if you'd like comments, do that. And then everyone, you can submit additional written information to the board following this meeting. So we always accept written comments after the meeting. We ask that you submit written information on or before April 17th. So April 17th will be the last opportunity to provide comments to the board.
I want to say that is a typo. That should be February 17th. I really apologize for that. So
Sorry,
February 17th. It's okay. That's my fault.
17th. Yes. February 17th, because the determination is due at the end of March. So written comments, you will have until February 17th to give us written comments. I will tell you that we have received comments in response to comments made by each party to date, as up to even yesterday. We are not going to be able to take in all of those rebuttals that you're sending us if you give them to us after February 17th, as we're writing that final determination. So please make your points in the information you are submitting to us prior to February 17th. Because otherwise we may not be able to include all those rebuttals and things that you're giving us after that date. So that's February 17th, the last opportunity to provide comments to the board, because at that board's next meeting, there's not going to be any public comment from the petitioners or the interveners. Brad is going to provide context relating to the relevant statutory standards that will be considered at this meeting. And after that, again, I'll be calling on the petitioners and interveners for comments, questions, also from the board for comments and questions. So I'm going to hand this over to Brad right now, and we're going to talk about the first statutory standard. So Brad, are you ready to begin?
Okay, so I'm going to cover briefly the 5 statutory standards that will be relevant at today's meeting, and then we'll have an opportunity for some public comment. We're going to have that hopefully relating to the public comment of the statutory standards. So you'll hear all the standards in quick succession. After the public comment, we'll have an analysis and discussion in more detail of those statutory standards. The first standard is characteristics of the territory. 660-207-1A. I'll read characteristics of the territory. The entire territory of the proposed village or city shall be reasonably homogeneous and compact, taking into consideration natural boundaries and natural drainage basins, soil conditions, present and potential transportation facilities, previous political boundaries, boundaries of school districts, shopping and social customs. An isolated municipality shall have a reasonably developed community center, including some or all of the features such as retail stores, churches, post offices, telecommunication facilities, and similar centers of community activity. When evaluating the characteristics of the territory, the statute directs the board to determine whether the proposed area already functions as a cohesive, identifiable community. The standard looks for a territory that is compact, contiguous, not bounded, features that support the efficient delivery of municipal services and reflect a shared community identity. In prior incorporation reviews, both the Department of Administration and Wisconsin courts have emphasized that proposals demonstrating natural or well-established boundaries, consistent land use patterns, and a clear community center have been viewed as aligned with the statutory intent. By contrast, irregularly shaped or shoestring boundaries, scattered development patterns, or areas lacking a unified sense of place weigh against meeting this requirement. Ultimately, this standard asks whether the territory presents itself as a coherent whole capable of operating as a municipality rather than a collection of disconnected parcels assembled for the purpose of incorporation. Number 2, the territory beyond the core, 660-207-1B. The territory beyond the core, the most densely populated 1/2 square mile specified in 660-205-3, a resident population with a 2 square mile area of 2,500 persons, a density of at least 500 persons in any 1 square mile. The territory beyond the most densely populated square mile as specified in 660-205-3 shall have the potential for residential and or urban land use development on a substantive scale within the next 3 years. The board may waive these requirements to the extent that water, terrain, or geography prevent that development. The statute sets minimum development expectations for the land outside of the most densely populated core of the proposed municipality, requires that the outlying territory either 1, have a meaningful level of existing development measured by more than 30 housing units per quarter section, or having at least 25% of its assessed value tied to commercial, industrial, utility uses, or show clear potential for substantial urban development within the next 3 years. In other words, these areas beyond the core cannot be predominantly rural, agricultural, or undeveloped unless there's a strong evidence that urban type development is imminent. The statute also gives the board discretion to waive these requirements when natural features such as water bodies, terrain, geographic barriers make development impossible or impractical. Overall, the standard is designed to ensure that the proposed municipality is not overextending its boundaries into territory that lacks an urban character or realistic potential for urban growth. Number 3, tax revenue, 660207-2A. Tax revenue. The present and potential sources of tax revenue appear sufficient to defray the anticipated cost of governmental services at a local tax rate which compares favorably with the tax rate in a similar area for the same level of services. Under the tax revenue standard, the board must determine whether the proposed municipality possesses a stable and sufficient tax base to support the full range of municipal services at a cost comparable to other communities. This requirement ensures that incorporation does not create a local government unable to fund essential services, maintain infrastructure, and meet long-term fiscal obligations. In prior incorporation reviews, both the department and the Wisconsin courts have emphasized that proposals demonstrating a balanced mix of residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional value, along with evidence of sustainable growth trends, have been viewed as consistent with this statutory intent. By contrast, communities that rely heavily on narrow sets of revenue sources or that include large areas with limited taxable value have historically faced challenges under this standard. Ultimately, this standard asks whether the proposed municipality can reasonably sustain itself without imposing undue financial strain on the residents or shifting costs to surrounding jurisdictions. The board review ensures that the incorporation results in a fiscally viable community capable of meeting its municipal responsibilities over time. Number 4, level of services, statute 660207-2B. The level of services, the level of governmental services desired or needed by residents of the territory compared to the level of services offered by the proposed village or city and the level available from a contiguous municipality, which has filed a certified copy of a resolution as provided under statute 660203-6. The statute requires the board to compare the services residents need or desire. The statute requires that the board compare the services residents need or desire with the services that the proposed village can actually provide, and then compare both of the services available from any neighboring municipality that files a resolution to annex the proposed village or territory. In practical terms, the board must determine whether incorporation will give residents the level of police, fire, EMS, public works, utilities, and administrative services that they desire, and compared with those offered by a contiguous municipality. The standard ensures that the incorporation does not leave residents without desired services. Ultimately, this standard asks whether the proposed municipality can responsibly assume the full range of municipal service obligations without creating service gaps, undue financial strain, or negative impacts on surrounding jurisdictions. Number 5, the impact on the metropolitan community. 660207-2D, impact on the metropolitan community, the effect upon the future rendering of government services both inside the territory proposed for incorporation and elsewhere within the metropolitan community. There shall be an express finding that the proposed incorporation will not substantially hinder the solution of governmental problems affecting the metropolitan community. This statute requires that the board evaluate how the incorporation would affect the broader metropolitan area, not just the proposed village itself. This analysis looks beyond the proposed municipality's internal capacity and examines its role within the larger metropolitan framework. The board must consider whether creating the new municipality would disrupt, duplicate, or complicate the delivery of governmental services and in the surrounding communities. To approve the incorporation, the board must make an explicit finding that forming the new village will not significantly hinder regional problem solving, coordinated service delivery, or long-term planning across the metropolitan community, and regional issues such as housing, stormwater management, transportation, among others. Ultimately, this standard asks whether the proposed municipality can integrate responsibly into the metropolitan community, supporting regional stability rather than creating new barriers to coordinated governance, service delivery, and long-term planning. I'll hand it back over to Dawn before the public comment.
So thank you, Brad, for the overview of the statutory standards. Now, according to the agenda, we're going to open the floor for public comment. And please remember that you should do your best to relate your testimony to the statutory standards we just summarized for you. And your time is going to be limited to 3 minutes. So please raise your hand in the Teams meeting so that you may be called on to provide your comment. So is there anyone who'd like to make public comments? Right, I do not see any hands raised. Oh, I see the City of La Crosse. Matt Gallagher
Yes.
from the Matt Gallagher phone.
Yes, Chair Vic, I just want to confirm, we are planning to do public comment here. However, if there is an opportunity for us to respond after the petitioners do during the individual factors, we can also do that at that time.
We are going to go through each standard. So Brad is going to go through the petition so far, standard by standard. And after each standard, we're going to ask for comment from the petitioners and the interveners, as well as ask questions from the board. So you will have the opportunity to comment after each standard.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Any additional public comments? Did you want to then give a comment now before we begin?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to give public comment.
Great, go ahead.
Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Robert Abraham. I am a property owner in the town of Campbell. I'm here today for a narrow and factual purpose to provide firsthand confirmation that the city of La Crosse's current sewer-related position described by the town in its filings is being communicated and applied in real, ongoing situations. My remarks are limited to matters within my personal knowledge. I'm not here to argue policy, to attribute motive, or to ask the department to resolve any individual disputes. The town, in communications to the DOA, stated that the city is taking a position that because the intergovernmental sewer service contract has expired, no new service connections may occur, and that growth within the town is effectively constrained unless annexation or new agreements occur. I can confirm that this position has been communicated to me by City of La Crosse staff and applied in practice. On January 14, 2026, I submitted a certified survey map, commonly referred to as a CSM, seeking to divide a parcel of land in the town of Campbell. The certified survey map does not authorize development. It does not authorize sewer service. It does not authorize increased wastewater flow. It establishes legal lot boundaries only. Under Wisconsin Land Division law, approval of a compliant certified survey map is commonly described as a ministerial action based on objective criteria. The city published review materials describe a certified survey map review typically occurring within 5 to 7 days. During the city's review process, I was informed by the city staff that approval of my CSM could not proceed due to the city's sewer-related position associated with the expiration of the intergovernmental agreement. I want to be clear about what I am stating and what I am not stating. I am not stating that sewer service was requested or approved. I am not stating that any development was proposed. I am not stating that the city issued a formal denial of my CSM. I am stating only that the city's no new sewer position was communicated as a limiting factor that affected the review and processing of a routine land division. From the perspective of a property owner, the practical effect is that ordinary land use actions in the town are now being influenced by unresolved governmental sewer issues. This matters for the incorporation record because it demonstrates that the town's concerns are not speculative or prospective. The position described by the town is already being applied to existing property under current conditions. I understand that the department's role today is not to resolve these matters. My purpose is simply to confirm as a factual matter that the effects described by the town are now occurring. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity. If there are any questions for the board, I'd love to answer them.
Thank you very much. 3 minutes exactly. Any additional public comment? Any additional public comment? Seeing no additional public comments, what we're going to do is we are going to move along. So if not, we will move into the discussion and analysis portion of the incorporation petition. Brad will first provide more detail as to how the petition meets each statutory standard, followed by a discussion among the board and responses from the petitioners and interveners as needed. Brad.
All right. So first we will go over The characteristics of the territory. So the characteristics of the territory standard looks to see whether the proposed village territory is compact and homogeneous. Wisconsin Statute 66207-1A requires the proposed territory to be reasonably homogeneous and compact. The legislator has enumerated a number of specific considerations, taking into account natural boundaries, drainage basins, soils, present and potential transportation facilities, prior political boundaries, school district boundaries, shopping centers, and social customs, and if the petitioners are isolated, whether there is a developed community center. Natural boundaries, natural drainage basins, soils conditions, transportation facilities, political boundaries, social opportunities, and the available shopping and economic opportunities. On top of this, the Wisconsin courts have recently added 2 additional considerations to this mix: land use patterns and population density. To go over the natural boundaries and political limits, the town of Campbell encompasses approximately 12.88 square miles of territory. French Island is approximately a 2.5 to 3 square mile naturally bounded island surrounded by the Mississippi and Black Rivers, which creates a clear continuous edge to the proposed village. The island's water boundaries and the town's historic political lines show that the territory is not a patchwork of disconnected parcels, but more or less a single well-defined unit. However, there are some minor boundary issues, most notably along Nokomis, Hiawatha Island, and portions of the town are only accessible by going across the city-owned lands. Likewise, some of the city-owned lands are only accessible by crossing town-owned lands. That creates a small patchwork, which in some cases can create confusion over which municipality is responsible for what areas. Drainage basins, floodplains, and soils. Much of the town is presently owned by the federal government and dominated by vast areas of floodplain, scattered islands that are largely undevelopable due to their physical constraints. Several instances of floodplains, wetlands, surface waters, and groundwater vulnerability limit new development in these undeveloped areas. These environmental constraints shape the development patterns across the island and limit where new construction can occur. Approximately 80% of the total township area is dominated by these types of environmentally sensitive areas, much of which are river surface waters. Approximately 10 square miles is undeveloped, while the remaining developable 2.5 to 3 square miles are nearly fully built out. The red line on this next map illustrates the approximate dividing line between the developable areas and those that are undevelopable due to the environmental constraints and the river lands. The present and potential transportation facilities. There are documented strong transportation connections, Interstate 90 access, the county highway interchange. There's MTU transit service and the La Crosse Regional Airport on the island. The local road maintenance and planned trail expansions. These elements support compactness by demonstrating connectivity across the island and access to regional markets. The river is also a means of transportation in non-winter months. Many of the riverfront and lakefront properties have docks accessible by boat, which form another mode of transportation when feasible. Bike and pedestrian facilities, while on French Island they're quite limited, they do offer a fairly accessible environment for residents who walk and bike or rely on non-motorized travel. The island's compact geography, flat topography, and established neighborhood street grid make it easy for residents to move between homes, parks, schools, and commercial areas without needing a vehicle if so. While sidewalks and bike routes are limited, local streets provide a safe, low-speed, low-traffic routes for pedestrians, while the island's proximity to regional trail systems create opportunities for longer distance biking and recreation. Residents also benefit from direct access to the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge, multiple boat landings, and shoreline paths, which together support a strong culture of outdoor activity. Planned trail improvements identified in the local and regional planning documents would further enhance the north-south and east-west connectivity across the island and into La Crosse, linking residential areas with parks, commercial corridors, and transit stops. These patterns show that French Island already functions as a fairly walkable, bike-friendly community where non-motorized travel could be a regular part of daily life and recreational opportunities. The concerns here are pedestrians and cyclists do need to rely on local roads for the majority of their routing. However, these local roads are fairly wide with slow speeds and relatively low traffic volumes. Local roads do tend to dead end due to the environmental constraints of the river, and being an island and with some wetlands and floodplains interspersed. This limits the feasibility of roadways that continue on beyond the core area. However, the existing community is well connected to adjacent communities with the interstate and another bridgeway. Outside of winter months, boat travel can be another viable option for residents. When looking at political boundaries and existing jurisdictions, we look to see how the boundaries of other jurisdictions, such as school districts, sanitary districts, align with the boundaries of the proposed village. Are their boundaries the same or similar to those of the proposed village, or do they differ significantly? Would they be fragmented or have irrational boundaries as a result of the incorporation? First, we'll go over the sanitary sewer services. The town of Campbell operates a well-established sanitary sewer system that already functions at the level expected of a Wisconsin village. The system provides municipal wastewater collection and treatment service to most developed properties on French Island, ensuring consistent regulated services across the community. The sanitary district maintains an extensive network of sewer mains, lift stations, and related infrastructure, all of which are managed locally and supported by the user fees rather than general property taxes. The district service area covers the island's primary residential and commercial neighborhoods, reflecting the compact development patterns of the community. Nearly all of the new development in recent years has occurred within the existing sewer service area, demonstrating that the system is aligned with the island's growth patterns and environmental constraints. Campbell's geology and groundwater conditions make private septic systems impractical in many areas, and making the sewer sanitary district's role essential for public health and environmental protection, as well as future growth opportunities. Overall, the sanitary district provides reliable, centralized wastewater service that supports compact land use patterns and demonstrates that the proposed village of French Island already possesses much of the infrastructure capacity expected of a full-service village. School and library districts. The French Island is fully served by the school district of La Crosse, which provides comprehensive K-12 education. All the residents within the proposed village boundaries. The district schools, programs, and transportation routes already treat French Island as an integrated part of their service area, ensuring continuity for families and students after incorporation. In addition, residents have access to the La Crosse County Library System with the F.J. Roberts Library located directly on the island and functioning as a central community resource. The library offers programming, materials, meeting spaces, coordinated services through a county-wide partnership, reflecting the island's established connection to a regional education and cultural networks. Together, the school district and library system demonstrate that French Island is already fully embedded in a stable, long-standing service structure consistent with incorporated municipalities. Social and recreational activity patterns. French Island demonstrates a strong, cohesive pattern of social and recreational activity that reinforces its identity as a unified community. Residents rely heavily on amenities located within the island itself, including neighborhood parks, boat landings, community gathering spaces, and a wide range of civic and volunteer organizations. The presence of the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge, extensive shoreline access, and multiple public boat launches create a shared recreational culture centered on fishing, boating, kayaking, bird watching, and other outdoor activities that are uniquely tied to the island's geography, as were demonstrated in the petition. Community-based organizations, churches, youth programs, and local events further strengthen the social cohesion, offering residents the opportunities to gather and volunteer and participate in civic life without needing to leave the island itself much of the time. The patterns show that French Island functions as a self-contained social community, with residents consistently engaging in recreational services and social life within the proposed village boundaries. This level of internal social activity is a strong indicator of homogeneity and supports the conclusion that the territory already operates as a cohesive, identifiable community. When noting the concerns here, there are a few. This is a strong aspect of the petition. When looking at the shopping and economic activity, the submittal documents a concentrated area of a commercial corridor, a wide range of local businesses. Economic activity within the proposed village of French Island is concentrated primarily along the island's established commercial corridors, especially near I-90 and County Highway B interchanges, which serve as the community's primary economic hub. This area includes a mix of retail, service businesses, industrial operations, airport-related commercial activity, reflecting a stable and diverse local economy. Additional economic activity occurs along key roadways in the Sky Harbor area and the river-based industrial areas where marine, construction, and logistic businesses operate. Together, these two centers provide employment, shopping, and services for residents, reducing the relying on neighboring municipalities and reinforce the island's identity as a self-sustaining community. The distribution of these businesses paired with the island's compact development pattern demonstrate that French Island already functions much as an economically coherent and locally serviced municipality. Another aspect is tourism is an indeed meaningful source of economic activity for French Island, driven largely by its unique riverfront setting and access to the Mississippi River, Black River, and Lake Onalaska. Visitors come for boating, fishing, kayaking, bird watching, and other water-based recreation. The island's boat landings, shoreland parks, and proximity to the upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge draw steady regional traffic. These natural amenities support local businesses, particularly marine services, hospitality, and recreational-oriented enterprises, and help reinforce French Island's identity as a destination for outdoor activity within the La Crosse metropolitan area. Concerns in this area, while this is a strong aspect of their petition, French Island has a stable and diverse mix of residential, commercial, industrial, and airport-related activity. Its economic centers are geographically concentrated in only a few areas, primarily near the I-90 County B interchanges, the Sky Harbor commercial area, and the river-based industrial corridor. However, this concentration means that large portions of the island, particularly those dominated by wetlands, floodplains, and refuge lands, contribute little to the taxable commercial base. As a result, the community's long-term economic growth opportunities are somewhat constrained by these environmental limitations and the finite amount of developable land. Additionally, the commercial corridor reliance on a limited number of access points and its proximity to the regional retail centers in La Crosse and Onalaska may create competitive pressures. These factors do not undermine the viability of incorporation, but they do highlight the importance of careful economic planning and diversification to ensure the proposed village maintains a resilient and sustainable tax base over time. When looking at population distribution, we look at the population and how the population is distributed to determine whether the population density is high or low, or whether the population is located in a compact fashion or scattered unevenly. The population of the proposed village of French Island is concentrated almost entirely within the island's developed residential neighborhoods, creating a compact and cohesive settlement pattern. Most residents live in established single-family and multifamily areas located along the island's interior road network near primary commercial corridors, while the extensive wetlands and floodplains and refuge lands to the northwest remain largely uninhabited. This results in highly clustered population footprint with the density levels that reflect a fully developed urbanized community rather than a rural township. Comparing the density to other recent incorporations, the result of French Island is comparable. The average population density for the proposed incorporated area is 350 persons per square mile. This compares to the density for Rib Mountain, which was at 285.6 per square mile, and Lisbon at 388 per square mile. However, when non-developable public lands are excluded, the effective population density increases significantly from 350 people per square mile to approximately 1,750 people per square mile. This underscores that the inhabited portions of the French Island function as a tightly organized residential community with limited, scattered, or isolated development. This distribution supports the conclusion that the territory is compact, homogeneous, and already operating as a unified municipal community. Over the past several decades, the French Islands population has remained relatively stable and consistently within a small range of fully developed urban community, with current estimates placing the population at roughly 4,500 residents. Growth has been modest, reflecting the island's limited supply of developable land and the presence of extensive wetland, floodplain, and refuge areas that naturally restrict outward expansion. Rather than expanding geographically, the community has matured within the existing residential footprint, maintaining a steady population base and supported by long-established neighborhoods and a stable housing pattern. This long stability reinforces the conclusion that French Island functions as a cohesive, built-out community rather than a rural or rapidly changing township. When the entire town is considered, the population density is on the low side when compared to the recent incorporations which met this compact and homogeneity standard. Although it does have a similar density to Lisbon and Rib Mountain, which recently met this standard. However, when waiving the public land and undevelopable lands, the density is more than comparable. Also, the population is clustered on the town's southeastern side with a sanitary district, rather than being evenly distributed throughout the town, which is mostly limited due to these natural constraints. The same is true with the economic development and how the retail and commercial activity is limited to the southeastern side, and the same situation with population. When looking at land use to determine whether the type of land uses within the proposed village tend to be more urban or rural in nature, Wisconsin case law holds this to be considered compact and homogeneous land uses should be urban rather than rural. When we look at Campbell's land use as a whole, what stands out immediately is how distinct and well-defined each category is within the island's limited geography. The town contains roughly 8,200 acres in total. Only a portion of that land is actually developable due to the presence of wetlands, floodplains, and refuge lands. Residential land is the dominant development on the French island. Approximately 35 to 40% of all developable land is devoted to housing, and these neighborhoods form a compact, contiguous core. The residential pattern is almost entirely urban in character. Single-family homes, duplexes, and some multifamily units are arranged along a traditional street grid. There's very little scattered or rural-style housing and virtually no large lot agricultural type residences. This concentration of homes is what gives the island this cohesive community character. Commercial land represents a smaller but important share of the island's footprint, roughly 8 to 10% of the developed area. These uses are clustered in two primary locations, the I-90 County B interchange, which serves as the island's main commercial hub, and the Sky Harbor area, which services businesses, retail, and airport-related commercial activity where they are located. This concentrated pattern means residents can access goods and services without leaving the island, reinforces the community's self-contained character. Industrial land is limited but meaningful, accounting for roughly 5% of the developed land base. These uses are mostly entirely located along the river-based marine and logistics corridor, while water-dependent businesses, construction yards, and storage facilities operate. These industrial activities contribute to the tax base and provide local employment opportunities, but is geographically contained and does not disrupt the residential cohesion of the island. Agricultural land is essentially non-existent on French Island. Environmental constraints, wetlands, shallow groundwater, floodplains, combined with decades of urban development mean there is little to no active agricultural operations and no land realistically suited for future agriculture. This absence of agricultural land is consistent with the island's long-standing urban character. And finally, recreational and conservational lands make up a significant portion of the island total acreage, often exceeding 45 to 50%, when wetlands, floodplains, shoreline parks, and refuge lands are included in this total. Much of this land lies within or adjacent to the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge, creating a large continuous block of protected open space. These areas are largely undevelopable, but they are central to the island's identity and provide extensive recreational opportunities. In conclusion, taken together, this land use pattern shows a community that is built out, compact, and urban in its developable areas, surrounded by environmentally constrained lands that reinforce the island's boundaries and limit outward expansion. The result is a territory that functions as a cohesive, identifiable municipal community, one that already exhibits the land use characteristics typical of an incorporated village. In the future, residential development may need to trend more towards redevelopment of areas of multifamily or duplex housing and residential uses. In addition, there's a potential for mixed use of commercial and residential uses as combined. This is a trend seen in many of today's mature communities where there's an aging residential, commercial, and industrial properties that can be successfully and economically purchased, demolished, and redeveloped as needed. And with that, I would turn it back over to Don for the board's input on that analysis.
Thanks, Brad, for that analysis of the first standard. Board members, do you have comments or questions about this standard? I'm just going to say, I think Kurt, you had a question before we began regarding the standard about the proposed villages, political boundaries, and the homogeneity with the city.
Right.
Did
Yeah, I
the
didn't.
analysis answer your question, or you still have that?
No, no, I don't think the analysis answered the question. I really didn't talk about the checkerboard existence, caused by various annexations over the years, which is a natural occurrence between a city and a town. And also there are some town islands that are kind of isolated from the rest of the proposed village that you can only reach through by going through the city. So I think I'd like to hear a little bit about that, maybe some commentary from the petitioner about some of the claims that the city made in its report. And I might, as long as I've got the mic, I might also add that I'm also, I'd like to hear the petitioner talk a little bit about what's different in this petition from the previous two that were rejected by DOA or the predecessors to the board in 70, I think it was 74 and 77. Um, I, I've really not heard any discussion of that except in the cities pointed that out in their report. So those are a couple things I'd like to hear.
All right, thank you. Hearing Kurt's questions, any additional questions for the petitioners before we let them try to address that? So anything, Tom or Mayor Nichols or Bill?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mayor Nichols. All right, hearing nothing from Bill or Tom, I'm gonna go to the petitioners so you can give us some comments and see if you can address Kurt's question regarding this standards and any other comments you may have based on Brad's analysis of the standards. So petitioners?
Well, thank you, Dawn. And Kurt, thanks for those very poignant questions. The irregularities and the city incursions that you referenced are much less prominent than many of the incorporations that the board has been involved in, including Lisbon. I represented the village of Sussex with regard to fighting the town of Lisbon when it had two prior incorporations. And over the years, the town and the village made those incursions somewhat less prominent, but nonetheless, those remaining incursions are much more pronounced than what we're talking about here. I think the courts have recognized that when you look at this particular standard, reasonably homogeneous and compact, you take a holistic approach. You look at everything. And as I look at this particular proposed petition, and I realize that I'm representing these folks, but I think I would not say something that I couldn't really believe. This is the best example that I have seen in 42 years of practice of a ultimate boundary for a village meeting this particular standard. And with regard to what is different between 74 and 77 and now, first of all, the law has morphed and there have been revisions to the ordinance. One, two, the town has got itself in much better fiscal order. You've developed a sewer system within the town that is running very well. It is running efficiently. It is running fiscally efficiently. The infill of what existed between then and now is create a situation where the town is completely built out. There, I think Mr. Schmicky noted there's drove around the island and there's a couple of for sale signs on a couple of lots, but other than that, this is a completely built out municipality that meets all of the village standards. The only other, I agreed with everything that Brad talked about. It is a very cohesive community. There's a great shared community identity. And again, if you take a holistic approach, this certainly meets and exceeds the standards. As it relates to these areas where you have minor incursions of city-owned land, I think Brad indicated that they are minor in nature. I agree with that. If you do, again, take this holistic approach, and if you look at the statutory provisions related to the fact that you are not supposed to discount the petition on the basis of these waters, terrain, wetlands, that is the thing that accounts for the couple of islands that you talked about, Kurt. The statute forgives that, if you will, by virtue of the fact that it can't be connected. There's water in between it. And so I hope that answered your questions, Kurt.
Yeah, Kurt, do you need any
thanks.
follow-up on that? All right.
No, thanks.
Any additional comments from the petitioners?
No, I mean, I think unless there are
Okay.
any other questions, I think I covered it. Brad hit all the highlights. I just wanted to touch on a couple things that he kind of indicated were niches in our armor, which I don't think that they are.
Okay, thank you. Interveners, do you have any comments or points you wish to make about this standard? Interveners?
Yes, thank you, Chair Vic. We respectfully disagree with pretty much everything that was stated within the summary. I want to focus first on this idea of the boundaries and the land that's being incorporated. Over 80% of the proposed village is water. It is not developable and it has no potential for development. And that can't be ignored when looking at the overall standards here for incorporation. Specifically with the political boundaries, I do want to point out that the 2.5 mile area does not meet with any of our measurements related to French Island. French Island, the developable area is approximately 1.9 square miles. And importantly, over 54% of French and Hiawatha Islands are already within the city of La Crosse. And much of that has these checkerboard boundaries, which in the review of prior incorporation efforts is unique in its level of discrepancy. And particularly on Hiawatha Island, which is in the Comus Avenue between the French Island and the mainland, has an extreme checkerboard where you go from one property to the next, which has been reason for the IRB or the DOA to deny petitions in the past when you have that level of back and forth between one boundary municipality on the other. It lends to the inability of the city to provide upgrades to the road. It lends into property confusion and confusion as to what lands, which district property is within. Now, the proposed village is wishing to be a metropolitan community. And as we go through these standards, including this one, this idea of a metropolitan community does require a level of review higher than maybe an isolated municipality, an isolated village. The idea that the town provides a complete level of services and retail shopping does not hold up to the business list that they've put forth, which includes no professional services that people need, no medical, lacking many of the home upgrades, the professional services that people would have for home improvements, and does not have that cohesion. There's this emphasis on the rural character of the proposed village, both in the streets that are currently present, the lack of infrastructure like stormwater management or sidewalks, and the and that is okay for a rural community. However, the French Island, the town of Campbell development would not be there but for the city. It is reliant upon the city services, the city connections, the city cohesion, including within the school district, and including with the many services that the town needs and relies on that they cannot provide and do not provide themselves. I also want to at least address the idea that there's airport development that is not the city's. North of I-90, the airport is within the city. The airport industrial park to the west of the airport is within the city. And there is other industrial areas to the east and southeast of the airport that are within the city, creating additional islands, town islands, only accessible over county roads. And this idea of internal access, as we've raised before, relies upon the services of other communities. Nokomis Island is only accessible via county road, then progressing to a city road. So to get to any of the town properties in Nokomis requires going over city streets, as well as utilizing county roads, which are paid for by others. And internally, the two main connections, and indeed both connections from the north part of the proposed village to the southern part, require travel over county roads. There's not an internal cohesion or connectivity. So we would generally, I'll finally say that Lisbon was raised, and Lisbon went through a couple incorporation petitions. The first was denied, and after they went forward and sought boundary agreements and resolved some of those boundary issues, the second was granted. So Lisbon is if anything, an example of why the town does not meet the incorporation standards for compacted lodges.
Okay. Any additional comments? Thank you. We are going to go to the second standard then, territory beyond the core. Brad, I will let you take it from here. Brad?
All right, so territory beyond the core, statute 660207 1B. The statute was the 660207 1B directs the board to evaluate the territory outside the developed core, decide whether those areas can be substantially developed within the next 3 years. The standard guards against incorporations that include excess large tracts of rural, agricultural, or isolated lands which cannot be substantially developed within the next 3 years. The standard requires that vacant developable territory has a potential for substantial urban development, and the board can choose to waive this territory to the extent that water, terrain, or geography prevent development. The petitioners have requested a waiver of a fairly large portion of the territory that make up the remainder of the town beyond the village core-like area, due to such environmental constraints I've previously mentioned when describing the homogeneity and compactness. The publicly owned recreational lands, floodplains, wetlands, and groundwater geology, all of which prevent development of these lands. Much of French Island's acreage consists of wetlands and floodplains, surface waters, and public recreation lands, the Upper Mississippi River Refuge, and other parklands. The developed residential commercial core is concentrated at a smaller footprint along the island's southeastern side near the I-90 County B interchange. Petitioners argue that the outlying lands are part of the island's functional territory, serving recreational environmental protection and including them preserves municipal boundaries, prevents piecemeal annexation, and secures long-term planning control for infrastructure and conservation. The petition admits that the large tracts are undevelopable are intended to remain in public use. The refuges, parks, and wetlands and floodplains. Petitioners justify the inclusion on the basis of these lands are integral to the island's identity and to the practical administration of services and environmental protections, not because they will generate near-term taxable value. The red line on this map sort of shows the divide between the developable lands that make up the bulk of French Island to the southeast and the environmentally sensitive lands and surface waters to the northwest. As it stands, French Island is a largely fully developed, while countless redevelopment opportunities exist for the area. There is almost no vacant land, only noting a few vacant parcels for sale during our trip there that would be available for new greenfield type development. The other islands and surface waters within the town are all undevelopable and are largely publicly owned, which would necessitate them being waived from this standard. Therefore, we largely considered that this statutory standard would be met by the petitioners. When we were driving around the area prior to the December public hearing, there appeared to be only a few rural wooded acres along the shoreline that could be potentially developed at potential great expense. However, the petitioners say that what we saw is actually not developable due to environmental constraints, such as wetlands and floodplains, also due to much of the portion of the town being publicly owned for recreation. We only noted 3 parcels that had for sale signs in their yards. And given a population plateau, the population and residential growth hasn't grown much since the 2000. That's quite informative, particularly given that French Island has great road and water access, great amenities, immediate proximity to the La Crosse metropolitan area. You would think that new residential development will be booming here. The fact that it hasn't supports the idea that there's only a small amount of developable land left. As I mentioned previously, approximately 10 of the 12.88 acres or 12.88 square miles of the town of Campbell is largely undevelopable due to the location of the floodplain, surface water, and other environmental constraints. When considering these development factors, the fact that Campbell is not strong on development factors may be another indication that the petitioners are correct and what's developable has already been developed. Substantial development, the area has largely been built out and only a few vacant parcels remain, fewer than 10 if you sort of extrapolate some of the vacant ones we saw, the developable acres remaining. Some additional lands may be feasible for redevelopment with engineering strategies that address flooding concerns. However, these building practices are expensive and would remain largely cost prohibitive for many residents. Although the development factors are not strong, so few acres are subject to this standard, and Campbell does not have great access and location to support the finding that the standard is met. The remaining parts of the town of Campbell that are publicly owned, water and islands, qualifies for an exemption, and I would argue that this statute is met. I would pass it back to Dawn for comment and questions.
All right, board members. So any questions for staff about this standard? Board members?
So just so I understand, this is Kurt. So, just so I understand, so the staff is recommending that we waive the requirement of that the petitioners be able to show that there's potential for growth in the next 3 years.
That is correct. This map shows the FEMA floodplain outlining the developable areas. Even though this is a facilities map, this is probably the best map that I saw that showed how the floodplain sort of interacts with the village or the potential village. And it shows that the area is largely built out to its maximum capacity, and the area in consideration, the plus or minus 10 square miles to the northwest, should be exempt from this standard, thus bolstering the territory beyond the color standard and saying that it's met. So yes, I would agree with that, Kurt.
So my comment is, and petitioners can feel welcome to respond to this. If the board does this and waives, this requirement, basically we're acknowledging that this new incorporated village has no growth potential whatsoever. And I'm not sure how you can afford to be a viable incorporated village with urban service delivery that's necessary when you have no growth. We're operating under levy limits. How are you going to bring in new revenue? I suppose you could pass some kind of permission from the levy limit referendum. But it is concerning me that we're just saying, okay, we're going to waive this growth requirement and not acknowledge that there's literally not going to be any potential for growth in the community's levy in the future and ability to pay for services necessary.
I would
Just
argue.
can I, Eric, you know, everyone, this is Eric's last meeting. Eric is retiring at the end of the week. So, Eric, do you have any experience, you know, with similar waivers?
Well, Dawn, as you remember, we tend to waive. Well, the statute allows us to waive territory based on water, geography. I forget the exact words, but kind of water, geography, or things of that nature. So, like for example, for Rib Mountain, if you recall, we waived a lot of the territory which was publicly owned state and county forest, as well as steep slopes. If you recall, Rib Mountain had a lot of steep kind of granite geography. So we waived that. We've also waived extensive groundwater areas. Like if you remember with the Summit proposal, that had extensive groundwater areas. Excuse me, not groundwater, but wetland areas, which we waived. So for this example, with this situation here with Campbell, a lot of the area is water. I'm not sure how you develop that unless you did stilts or something. And it's also got a lot of islands which are publicly owned. So kind of like Rib Mountain, where there was a lot of state and county owned lands. This is publicly owned also. In this case, it's owned by the federal government. So yeah, based on past precedents, I would think that this situation would be pretty appropriate favor.
I'm going to also ask you on this, put you on the spot, Eric, about lack of expandability. I don't know, like, you know, can you think of any other incorporations that you've done where they've kind of all in the middle of all these incorporated areas, so they're not able to expand?
Yeah, this one, you're right. This one is when we did our site visit, I only observed two vacant lots that were for sale. I'm sure there's a few more, but basically it's pretty built out. And so this situation reminds me a lot of the Brookfield petition in Waukesha County. If you recall that one, it was really pretty much built out. And so what Brookfield was doing was they were doing redevelopment. So taking parcels and developing to a higher intensity. And so that's probably what you're looking at here too, is not not like greenfield development, not development for the first time. You're probably looking at redevelopment. And so conceivably you could increase the tax base through redevelopment.
All right, Kurt, does that help? I mean, to know that we've done this in the past, this wouldn't be a first waiver ever.
No, oh yeah, no, I was aware of that, and I just thought that those communities, particularly Rib Mountain, was in a different situation. They still had lots of growth potential in the future within the territory that was being incorporated. But no.
I think Kurt, with Rib Mountain, if I recall, we had 600 acres of vacant developable territory. So you're correct about that. There was, here in this situation, we don't have 600 acres of greenfield development.
Right. So I'm going to go on. Any other board questions or concerns? All right. Petitioners, comments, points you want to make?
Sure. Kurt, this is directed to your analysis of the statute as well as the arguments that have been made by the city. The statute stands for the proposition that in this category alone, when you talk about growth potential, that is not this particular portion of the statute. Territory beyond the core has the ability to develop within 3 years to an substantial urban development. What that intent of that ordinance or that statute is that you don't have thousands and thousands of acres of farmland that is not going to be developed. That's the purpose of this statute. And so when you say the territory beyond the core has a potential for development, what it really means is, are you going to have a fully urbanized land area either now or within 3 years? And the waiver is for the purpose of recognizing that there are some areas that are impossible to develop. So obviously, if you have virtually every square inch of territory developed in this particular town, you've met that standard. Now, the ability to generate revenue in the future is not under this category. That's not the purpose of this particular portion of the statute. That relates to the ability to generate enough tax revenue, and that will be the next thing that that we will be going through. And but it's not the territory beyond the core. This meets the territory beyond the core because not only is there potential for development on a substantial scale, it is already developed. So I hope that addresses the question. Again, I agree with the staff analysis of this. I think it's spot on. I think that the arguments that the city has made is completely misunderstanding this statutory standard. That's it.
All right, thank you, petitioners. Interveners, you have comments that you wish to make about this standard, interveners?
Yes, we do. Respectfully, Attorney Riffle has this completely backwards, and we cover this in detail in our report on pages 28 to 29 and beyond. And I'm going to read a quote from that. So we would say, in fact, this idea of needing potential for growth is explicitly stated in the legislative note to 1959 Assembly Bill number 226A, which established the present incorporation scheme. The note states, quote, "The requirements for creation of a village or city near a metropolitan community are more stringent to avoid the creation of governmental units without sufficient area or population to economically supply services or perform functions which are needed," unquote. So the basis of this standard is to ensure that there is adequate growth potential for a community to provide the services that are required for a metropolitan community. We're again not talking about an isolated community, but a metropolitan community. And the proposed village has 1.9 square miles of developed or developable, so mostly developed land, that by inclusion of an additional 10 square miles of undevelopable water meets the 4 square mile minimum requirement for a metropolitan community. And this would be a unique situation to establish precedent to waive it in this situation, where unlike with Red Mountain, they had potentially undeveloped developable land, and they had the potential to annex and grow. This will not be the case. What you have here will be locked in forever. And while other factors touch on the financial potential of the village, this village's financial capacity is locked in. So the level of urban services that will be and are needed for a metropolitan community are going to be hampered by the lack of any growth potential in the community. Now, I touched on this before, but they're wanting to incorporate as a metropolitan village, and they emphasize this rural characteristics, and they treat that as a feature, not a failing in their petition. But this is a metropolitan community that is closely intertwined and dependent upon the city, and it has no growth potential. So when there are needs to grow, when there are needs for additional financial resources, they will not have that potential, and it will become the city's problem. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are going to move on to the next standard. So Brad, if you'd like to take us through tax revenue. And you're on mute if you're talking.
Yep. Thank you for that. Under Wisconsin Statute 660207-2A, tax revenue, the board must determine whether the proposed municipality has a stable, sufficient, and sustainable tax base to support the full range of municipal responsibilities. The standard requires that the board examine whether the present and potential sources of tax revenue appear sufficient to provide village-level services. The factors that we look at include equalized value, debt, their proposed budget, and the current and proposed tax rate. In prior determinations, the department and Wisconsin courts have emphasized the tax base must be capable of supporting the municipal services at levels comparable to similarly situated villages. The board must consider future trends, including whether the tax base is growing, stable, or declining. Ultimately, this standard asks whether the proposed village of French Island can financially sustain itself without creating undue burdens on residences or shifting the cost to neighboring jurisdictions. The equalized value, Table 6 shows an equalized value of currently at $583,859,000, with 83% of that being residential, 16% of that being commercial. Table 7 shows how Campbell compares favorably with similarly sized villages in the region, falling right in the middle of other similarly sized municipalities. Table 8 shows how Campbell's equalized value compares favorably with other areas, towns, and villages, including more equalized value than the villages of Rockland and Bangor. And Table 9 shows it compared comparatively to other villages across the state of Wisconsin. I'm going to stay on this slide as we talk about the rest of the aspect of tax revenue. Campbell has no debt. When considering debt, it's given a relatively modest equalized value and the town may potentially borrow nearly $25 million. When we look at Campbell's existing and proposed budgets, what we see is a community that is already operating with the structure and stability of an incorporated community. The town's current revenues and expenditures are just over $3.1 million. Because the entire town of Campbell is included in the incorporation area, the existing and proposed budgets are nearly identical. About 1/3 of Campbell's revenue comes from property taxes, with intergovernmental aids and public charges for services making up another substantial portion. On the expenditure side, public works and public safety remain the largest and most essential categories. Campbell maintains a lean but highly capable workforce, delivering a level of service that exceeds what is typically found in many rural towns. These services are supported throughout a combination of full-time staff, part-time employees, and long-standing intergovernmental agreements. Administratively, Campbell operates with a full range of municipal structures. The town administrator, clerk's office, and treasurer's office manage budgeting, elections, licensing, communication, zoning, and day-to-day operations. These functions mirror what the department normally sees in established villages of this size. Campbell also maintains its own full-time police department, providing 24-hour coverage and coordinated mutual aid with surrounding jurisdictions. The department responds to high volume of calls relative to the town's size, reflecting the island's dense residential neighborhoods and active commercial corridors and reliance on tourism. Fire protection and EMS services are also delivered through established regional partnerships that ensure reliable response times across the island. These cooperative arrangements are longstanding and will continue unchanged under this incorporation. The town's public works department maintains local roads, stormwater infrastructure, park facilities. Staff handles snow removal, street maintenance, signage, and seasonal operations across the island's developable areas. Campbell also maintains several parks, shoreline access points, supporting both neighborhood recreation and regional outdoor use tied to the Mississippi River refuge lands. Planning and zoning, permitting, code enforcement are handled administratively in-house, reflecting the island's built-out and urban development pattern. Campbell Sanitary District operates a community wastewater collection system with its own staff, governing body, and budget. Upon incorporation, the district would dissolve its assets and liabilities. Operation would transfer to the new village, ensuring continuation of services. Assessment services and information technology are supported through contracted professionals. Finally, Campbell's tax rate has remained stable over time and is comparable to or lower than many nearby municipalities of a similar size. Residents are not considered to be disproportionately burdened at this time by local taxes, and the projected village tax rate remains consistent with current levels. Taken together, these budget and service characteristics show that Campbell already functions as a full-service municipal community. Incorporation does not require the creation of new departments or major operational changes that could not be supported by its current tax revenue. It simply formalizes the structure that is already in place within the township. When considering concerns for this category, we really noted none. Campbell has a fairly modest equalized value compared to other communities. It has zero debt and low tax rate, and it already provides high quality of services and is kept up with capital equipment and maintenance costs and facility needs. The proposed budget appears reasonable and could be supported by the tax base. We would assume that the sanitary district assets and liabilities, including the proposed water services, would be included in this. However, there still do not appear to be any concerns here. The district has functioned well over the past several decades, has a stable revenue stream from users, so no apparent competition either, because environmental constraints make private on-site sanitary sewer systems, septic tanks unfeasible in this area. It appears that Campbell and French Island does have the present and potential sources of revenue to function as a village at a favorable tax rate and maintain its current level of services and beyond. I'll turn it back over to Don for comment from the board.
So board members, any comments or questions about this standard?
Yeah, this is Tom Mathias. Question for the town. Do you have, or do you provide services such as emergency services to the federal refuge, and what are the costs associated with that? Thank you.
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, so I'm going to call on anyone at Town Hall to please weigh in on that. I know we got some water patrol boats.
Hi, I'm Lee Donahue, and I spent part of my career working for the refuge. The refuge has their own conservation officers, and so if called upon, our police department, as any other neighboring municipalities department, including the sheriff, we all work together collaboratively, but the refuge has their own conservation officers.
So if there was an emergency, like an ambulance was needed on the federal property, would that ambulance, the EMTs come from the current town, or would they come from the city?
It would come from the town. We have dive rescue that we work with, La Crosse County Dive Rescue. Our fire department actually has also a boat that they utilize when there's emergencies out there. And we also work well with the sheriff's office and the City of La Crosse Police Department when their boat patrols are out there.
Tom, does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Any additional board questions?
This is Bill. I have a question as to whether the provision of water enters into this standard, because water and sewer are user fee rather than paid by property taxes. I assume it maybe does not, because obviously the cost of providing water in this unique situation may be rather high. But it's going to be a user fee rather than paid by property taxes.
So Brad and Eric, you want to talk about that? Is that considered in this standard or the other standard, or another standard?
We consider that in the next standard. I sort of muddied the water a little bit in that one, just talking about the existing level of services and that the tax revenue could support that existing level. In hindsight, I probably should have kept some of that narrative to the level of services, but we'll cover water and sewer services and the level of general services in the next statutory standard.
Thank you.
All right, any other board questions?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Dawn. Yeah, Dawn, this is Kurt. So I did bring this up in the last question, which is probably out of our last standard, which is probably out of place, like Stan pointed out. But so I understand and admire the town's desire, if they become a village, to continue the same level of services that they are currently offering. But even if you continue to offer the same level of services, inflation and other, costs will increase. The cost of providing that level of service will increase. And so I was just wondering, what do village staff or the petitioners think about 5 years down the road, how they're going to pay for even the same level of services? And just on top of that, has the town ever found it necessary or considered going to a referendum for increasing levy beyond its allowable, state imposed limit? Has that ever been done in the past?
Petitioners, I'm going to let you answer that question and then go into your comments about the standard.
Okay, I'll just cover everything in my comments right now. At the public hearing, it was very, very evident that if we were to go to referendum because we needed additional revenue, and Kurt, I deal with levy limits every day, and I deal with a lot of referendum associated with that. Usually it's in the public, the protective services area, fire and police. But I took it as this community is so cohesive and the board has been so transparent that if there were the need to go to levy to generate sufficient funds for a particular purpose, that would be very well received because of the fact that their tax rate is, as low as it is. And, that's always a catch-22 we talk about, Kurt. You see some administrators in municipalities try to go to the max on the increase that they are able to do on an annual basis, just because there may be a down the road kind of a situation where you would need to build a little bit of a cushion there. The town has not done that. And so I think you have that capacity to go to referendum if you need to, because the folks there would recognize that there is right now such a low local tax rate that it would not create a big problem. So no, I don't, unless somebody from the town can tell me otherwise, I do not believe there's ever been a situation where we needed to go to referendum. And I will pause here for a second to hear from you if I'm incorrect.
No, you're right, Stan. This is Dan talking, the chair. Yeah, I've lived on the island over 50 years, and I cannot remember ever having a referendum to increase our levy, ever, in 50 years here. So we have not had to. And as you know, as was mentioned, we have very little and no debt. And we can borrow up to 5%, as you know, of our value and equalized value. And we can go to 27 million and we don't hardly have any. So financially, we're very sound, and we have been that way for decades.
And I am going to address the question that was raised related to the water system. First, whether we are a town or a village, that water system has to be built. There's no question about it. And that water system will be built by the town. The city is not going to be lending one penny towards that, because the town residents are not going to want to become part of the city. And so then the question becomes, well, can this town afford that? And I was talking to staff, and I heard that there might be some concerns related to that. I do believe that belongs in both this criteria and the next criteria. So the information that was presented was that the total cost of building out this water system that has to be put into place because of the PFAS that came off of the city airport that is creating problems with the groundwater in the area, will be approximately $64 million. To date, the well one has been completed and has been paid for with safe water drinking loans and grants, and a very small 2.2% loan. That was about $1 million. The rest, there's already approved 8.5 million in USDA grant, 1.7 million in an EPA grant, and there are 13 million in safe drinking water program loans and the connection charges, which brings it down to 38 million, which will be funded. Ehlers and Associates put together a proposal that will get us USDA rural development loans, which are long-term. I think they can go up to 40 years. They're going to do it in two separate loans, first of $20 million, and then the second one for like $18 million. So that's already been put together. The plan is there, and it will ultimately be paid for by, as was noted, the ratepayers. So if you talk about tax revenue, it's not going to impact the conclusions that I agree completely with that Brad set forth to the board. So I don't know if that answered any questions, but that's all I have with regard to this particular statutory requirement.
Right, thank you. Interveners, you want to comments or points you'd like to make about this standard?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, we'd first like to point out that the city has raised numerous issues that have not been addressed in the staff's analysis of this issue and other issues. And I would refer the board again to our report, which provides that ample analysis of this issue. One of the things that has not been addressed is the fiscal capacity. With the fiscal capacity is the fact that for the last couple of years, the town has been operating at a deficit. Their reserves have been going down, and that is projected to continue in their 2026 budget. They have limited services that they're already providing. Their volunteer fire department, we've provided information about how across the state and across the country, those types of services are becoming harder to sustain. And when that issue reaches the proposed village, there is not the capacity to address that. There is not the fiscal capacity to increase the amount to address that issue, among others. The petition leaves out addressing any of the many needs of transitioning from some of the currently county supported services to services that they have to provide themselves. And just the general costs of moving from a town to an incorporated municipality. And with regards to the water system, that certainly comes in under the next analysis as well. One thing to point out is that there are significant road costs that are road repair costs that are not accounted for in user rates that will have to be paid for through borrowing and through increases in taxes. So that's another part of the analysis that's not been viewed here with the board's initial analysis.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are going to go on to the next standard level of services. So Brad, if you'd like to take it from here.
Yeah, so under the level of services standard 660207-2B, the board is asked to determine whether the proposed village of French Island can provide the level of governmental services desired or needed by residents of the territory compared to the level of services offered by the proposed village or city and the level available from the contiguous municipality, which files a certified copy of a resolution as provided in 660203 subsection 6. The full range of municipal services at a level is both adequate and sustainable, and the standard focuses on the practical ability of the community to function with the range of desired municipal services. I'm going to pop up a couple of different maps of the existing services there while we discuss these. In Campbell's case, the record shows that the town already operates with the service profile of an incorporated municipality. The town maintains its own police department, staffed and equipped to provide 24-hour coverage. It participates in coordinated mutual aid arrangements with surrounding jurisdictions. Fire protection and EMS services are delivered through a combination of local capacity and regional partnerships, ensuring reliable response times across the island, even after incorporation. These services are funded through stable revenue sources and have been consistently maintained over the decades. Public work operations are similarly robust. The town manages road maintenance, snow removal, stormwater functions, and park upkeep across the developed portions of the island. The sanitary sewer system is operated through the town sanitary district and provides centralized wastewater collection and treatment to most residents, reflecting a level of infrastructure typical of a built-out village. The town also coordinates with regional transit providers, library services, and school district operations, demonstrating that French Island is already fully integrated into the broader service network of the La Crosse metropolitan area. The petition further shows that Campbell has administrative structures necessary to support municipal governance. The town maintains budgeting, financial management, code enforcement, election administration, public communication functions that mirror those of similarly sized villages across the state. These systems are already in place and functioning, meaning that the incorporation would not require the creation of largely the creation of new services or departments and major operational changes. When we look at the level of service standard, the statute asks us to make a direct comparison between the level of services residents desire or need, the services proposed by the village would provide, and the services available from a contiguous municipality that has passed a resolution, in this case, the city of La Crosse. And when we walk through the comparison service by service, the picture becomes a little more nuanced than the town's or the city statement would suggest. When we look specifically at the water services, the comparison between Campbell and the city of La Crosse highlights two very different service model approaches. Campbell is in the process of designing and constructing its new municipal water system, something that would happen absent incorporation. This is funded through a combination of federal and state grants, external and internal financing, long-term debt obligations. The system is intended to replace the island's reliance on private wells to provide PFAS-safe drinking water to residents. While the project represents a major investment in public health and infrastructure, it's estimated to be somewhere between $65 and $80 million in total. It's still in development, and the new village would assume responsibility for operating, maintaining, and financing the system once it's built. And they've already shown a clear record of collecting that financing as they've gone along with that path. By contrast, the city of La Crosse already operates a fully developed, professionally staffed municipal water utility with established treatment facilities, distribution networks, and long-term capital planning already in place. The city system is mature, well-regulated, and financially stabilized through a large customer base. Under the statute, the board must compare these two service levels, a proposed system that will require substantial new debt, operational capacity, and investment from the village versus an existing fully functioning urban water utility already capable of meeting the residents' needs today once the necessary infrastructure has been in place. This comparison is an important part of the evaluating whether or not the proposed village can provide the level of water service residents desire or need relative to what is available from the city. Additionally, Campbell argues that it already provides all of the urban services that its residents want and need, and that the city offers nothing additional that the island residents desire or need. However, the city's report points out that the residents of French Island routinely use and rely on a number of urban services that the town does not provide today, nor does it intend to provide as a village once incorporated. These can include, but are not limited to, senior services such as structured programming to support the city senior center, a fully professional staff parks and recreation system with accessible playgrounds, swimming pools, splash pads, athletic fields, dog parks, beaches, and paved trail networks, a complete library system with programming, digital resources, and community spaces, a full-time professional fire and EMS service that the town relies on through agreements but does not operate in its own capacity. So the question for the board is not simply whether Campbell can provide adequate services, but also that Campbell residents do benefit from some city services. The statute requires a comparison of what residents desire and need and whether the proposed village can meet those needs. In several categories, particularly senior services, recreation, libraries, and full-time fire EMS, the city clearly offers a broader and more comprehensive range of urban services than does the town currently. Campbell residents do appear to use and benefit from many of those services. The town's assertion that the city offers no additional services is not supported by the record. However, residents do use these services, they do rely on them, and they are part of the urban service environment of a metropolitan community that many other villages would rely on. The board must weigh whether the town's narrow service profile still meets the desired needed threshold, even though the city provides a fuller range of urban services which the town residents use and benefit from, much like other many municipalities in the region. Therefore, I would offer a key question as the board discusses this item, rather than just a concern or conclusion. Would the town's narrower service profile still meet the desire or needed threshold for the residents, even though the city provides a more complete urban service package and the town residents appear to benefit from some of those additional services that the city of La Crosse provides? And with that, I would turn it back over to the board for a little bit more discussion with Don.
Yeah, so board members, what are your comments and questions on this standard? I know Kurt had some questions about this. Anyone else? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Kurt so we can talk about some of your questions. Oh, I see Bill. Bill also had questions about this. So Mayor Nichols or Tom, do you have questions about this?
I do not at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Nichols. I'm going to turn it over to Kurt for his question first. Yeah, I know you had some concerns about this. You want to talk about those?
Well, I think Bradley, in his analysis covered my question perfectly, and that was just to point out the inaccuracy, it seems, of the petitioner's claim that town residents, make no use of city services, and the city had pointed out in its report that, and like Bradley pointed out, that they do in fact. And I mean, this is part of a metro area, and city provides a lot of quality services like that the town currently doesn't. So naturally, people are going to be using those services. What Bradley didn't say, and I think should be said, is that if a new village is created and the new village continues to just provide the narrow level of services that it currently does, which is its intent, they can really only do that because they're right next to a city that's providing much broader services, and the residents of the town and the future village aren't really paying for those services that the city's making available. And that results in some inequities that I think will be brought up probably in the next standard. So that's more of a comment than a
And
question.
that's absolutely fine. Bill, what about your question? Was your question addressed by Brad's analysis, or do you still have some things you want to mention?
No, the whole water issue was addressed.
Okay, thank you. So not hearing anything else from the board, right? I'm going to go on to the petitioners for their thoughts and comments on this standard. Petitioners?
So the instances of the use by town folks of services are very, very limited, number one, as I read it. And the level of services that are provided by a city and the level of services that are provided to a 5,000 population village, it's a matter of scale. Obviously, a village of 5,000-6,000 people are not going to need or desire a bus system. They're not going to need or desire necessarily a full-blown senior center and or services associated with that. I do believe that the town does have some of those programs, and I defer to folks that when I'm done to talk about that. But what is the difference going to be with the change from town to village? Right now, presumably, the city is not creating services that are not being paid for by fees for those services. The city has the authority to have a two-structure fee system whereby non-residents would be paying for those services. And if the city is not getting those services paid for by their neighboring municipalities that are using them, then shame on them. I was, very, very much impressed about the fact that virtually every single individual in the longest public hearing on an incorporation I've ever been involved in, each and every one of them indicated that they do not desire or need any services from the city. And so that situation can be very, very quickly dealt with by the city, simply requiring payment for those services by non-residents, and there will be no impact on the city. But this particular criteria deals with the level of services desired or needed by the citizens of the town. And I think it was quite apparent that the town residents do not need or want the services that are provided by the city. And I would also note that it is probably safe to assume that city residents come over to Campbell and utilize services that are located on the Campbell in terms of their parks, in terms of their recreational activities through their park system, through the use of their library, which is, I think it's a unified library. So, but it's located in the town. So I believe that if you look at the level of services as a whole, not these very minor, small part of the full panoply of services that are provided, they comparably and favorably compare with the other municipalities in the area, not just the city of La Crosse, but the other municipalities. So that's how I would respond to that. I don't know, is there anybody from the town that can comment on this particular criteria?
Just a couple comments. Thanks, Dan. We do have MTU bus service from La Crosse over here. We've been paying for it for 30 years. It's been a great partnership, helps our people, helps the city because we pay a fee for it. We have a very active, vibrant library over here, and the city just recently announced they were closing their library on the north side. So we really expect people from the north side more and more to come over here and use our library. We offer a great variety of things over there at the library. So it does work both ways in this issue here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, petitioners. Interveners, you have comments and points you'd wish to make, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The analysis does a good job of highlighting the issues here that the city has identified. And I would say that the use of the city services by the town are documented in the city's report and go much further to showing what is actually needed and used by town residents than the unsupported conjecture that has been offered today. The proposed village is intimately, as we've said, tied to the La Crosse area, and the La Crosse services that are provided by the city are used by the residents and are relied upon the residents so that the town is able to have what they say is their slim government that provides limited services. They don't have to have the Parks and Rec department. They don't have to have the Public Works department. They don't have to have the level of governmental services and employees because they are located with adjacent to and among city offered offerings, services. This library has been raised a few times. I also want to emphasize that the city is undergoing, the main city branch library that does the majority of the service to the area is undergoing a $3 million renovation to provide the technology and the support to to the 21st century, to the types of services that residents are using and rely on in their libraries. And this is publicly available and utilized by the Town of Campbell residents. The equity issue is a real one and is certainly touched on in the next metropolitan issues. But the city is providing services so that their residents can benefit, and ultimately that the broader region benefits. And opposed to what Attorney Riffle has said, the city cannot just increase fees on the use of their public parks and say that anyone who brings their child to a splash pad has to pay a high fee if they don't live in the city. They can't charge differential rates for bus service to the town residents than the city residents. That's not how that works. And so the idea that the city has other avenues to recoup costs for services that the town residents use, need, and rely on just simply isn't true. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I just want to go back, board members. Any additional questions on this particular statutory requirement? Because I know this is an important one. All right, hearing none, we're going to go to the next statutory requirement. So Brad, if you'd like to start on impact on the metropolitan community.
Yeah, so for impact of the metropolitan community, 660207-2D, the board must make an express finding that the proposed incorporation will not substantially hinder the resolution of government problems affecting the metropolitan community. The statute goes on to talk about intergovernmental regional issues would include stormwater, transportation, groundwater, housing, economic development, tourism, among other things. The factors the board examines would include cooperation with municipal neighbors, adequate service levels, and area plans, among others. So moving on to show that this map of French Island shows its municipal neighbors as I'm talking here. So the intergovernmental agreements, the fire and EMS, La Crosse Fire Department and Mutual Aid, Campbell receives fire protection and emergency medical services through the longstanding arrangements with the City of La Crosse Fire Department, supplemented by its own services and regional mutual aid agreements that ensure coverage across the island. These partnerships extend beyond Campbell and support coordinated emergency response throughout the metropolitan area. Police protection, Campbell Police Department and La Crosse County Sheriff's Office. Campbell maintains its own full-time police department, which works closely with the La Crosse County Sheriff's Office and neighboring jurisdictions through mutual aid protocols. This cooperative model ensures seamless law enforcement coverage across the municipal boundaries. Airport and transportation coordination, La Crosse Regional Airport. Because La Crosse Regional Airport is located on French Island, Campbell participates in ongoing coordination with the City of La Crosse. It seems that the airport regarding transportation access, emergency response, and land use compatibility in and around the airport. Wastewater and environmental agreements, sanitary district and regional partnerships. Campbell Sanitary Sewer District coordinates with regional and state agencies on wastewater management and PFAS mitigation and environmental compliance. These partnerships remain intact under the incorporation and with the new village assuming the district's responsibilities. Recycling and solid waste, La Crosse County cooperative programs. Campbell would participate in the countywide recycling and solid waste programs administered by La Crosse County, ensuring consistent service delivery across the metropolitan area, even with the incorporation. Parks, trails, and river access. There's multi-jurisdictional coordination here, even including federal organizations. The town collaborates with La Crosse County, the City of La Crosse, federal agencies on trail maintenance, shoreline access, and recreational management tied to the Mississippi River and Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife Refuge. Campbell maintains collaborative working relationship with La Crosse County across public safety and environmental health, elections, and emergency management protocols. Extraterritorial authority is not a concern with the City of La Crosse, doesn't exercise its extraterritorial plat review over French Island. Remaining adjacent jurisdictions or towns should not possess the extraterritorial authority. Zoning, Campbell already administers its own zoning and land use regulations. Upon incorporation, the new village would assume the responsibilities for its own shoreline zoning currently administered by the county. Because Campbell already has planning and zoning capacity, this transition would be expected to be smooth. Private on-site wastewater treatment systems, while are minor concerns due to just the small amount of them remaining, La Crosse County will continue to regulate private septic systems, and these systems will exist in limited numbers on French Island and have not been increasing due to the limitations. So no regional service impact are anticipated with that. However, the city of La Crosse does bring up some fair points, acting as intervener in this proceeding. They have expressed several concerns regarding the proposed incorporation of the town of Campbell as affecting the metropolitan community. These concerns would focus on service coordination, regional planning, and the potential impacts on the metropolitan governance. Fire and EMS coordination, the city notes Campbell relies heavily right now on La Crosse Fire Department for fire and EMS response. And the city argues that incorporation could complicate the longstanding services agreement with them. Police services and mutual aid, the city expresses concern that incorporation may alter expectations for some service levels, reimbursement, or jurisdictional coordination across the metropolitan region. Airport-related agreements, the city argues that the incorporation could introduce new layers of municipal authority affecting zoning, land use compatibility, emergency response, and long-term airport planning in the region. Environmental and water quality coordination, the city highlights some ongoing regional efforts to address the ongoing PFAS contamination effort and stormwater management and Mississippi River water quality issues. It argues that incorporation may complicate the regulatory coordination or shift responsibilities in ways that would require renegotiation of existing intergovernmental agreements and frameworks. Economic development, the city notes that Campbell's location adjacent to downtown La Crosse, the interstate, and the airport make it a critical part of the region's economic landscape that is fundamentally connected to La Crosse. Transportation and infrastructure, La Crosse raises some concerns about the potential impact on regional transportation planning, including the airport access, bridge connections, and traffic management. In conclusion, this final statutory standard, the impact on the metropolitan community, the question before the board is whether incorporating French Island would disrupt the broader La Crosse metropolitan area's ability to deliver governmental services or address shared regional challenges together. I believe that the record shows that it would not greatly impact the metropolitan community. Campbell already provides its own police services, public works, sanitary sewer operations, and administrative functions, and these systems are longstanding and stable. Incorporation does not create new service gaps, nor does it shift responsibilities onto neighboring municipalities more so than already exist. Existing cooperative agreements such as the mutual aid, regional transit access, library services, and schools district coordination will remain fully intact and continue to operate exactly as they do today for the foreseeable future when incorporation happens. The petitioners make clear that the incorporation would simply formalize the municipal structure and the community that already functions under without undermining regional planning and intergovernmental cooperation or the delivery of services elsewhere in the metropolitan community. For these reasons, the petition concludes that forming the village of French Island would not substantially hinder the solution of governmental problems affecting the wider region, and therefore I would argue that it meets the requirements of this statutory standard. To go on in this conclusion, based on the record, I do believe that Campbell's incorporation would not substantially hinder the solution of governmental problems affecting the metropolitan community. In fact, I do think that incorporation may strengthen the regional coordination by giving Campbell a clearer authority to manage its own unique challenges, including airport-related land uses in that area, shoreline and environmental management, and the delivery of urban-level services that it already provides to a densely populated island community. The proposed village structure supports continued cooperation and enhances the community's ability to participate in the metropolitan planning and service delivery across the region. With that, I would turn it back over to Don for questions from the board.
Thank you, Brad. Board members, questions or comments about this standard? I know you had some questions about this one before we had the analysis. Do you still have questions? Anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I guess I take a different perspective than was articulated by staff. so the board, by this standard, we're supposed to be able to say, expressly find that the proposed incorporation will not substantially hinder the solution of governmental problems affecting the metropolitan community. And I don't guess I find it that easy to reach that conclusion because I think the city has pointed out some concerns that incorporation would lock in place existing boundaries, service discrepancies, and unfair inequities for payment of governmental services. And in that respect, it would substantially hinder the ability of the city and the town to enter into boundary agreements, maybe tax revenue sharing, service delivery. Um, I was a little concerned that the town has declined over the last 5 years, for instance, to participate in a study just to look at that the a neutral third party was going to look at fire delivery services in a more equitable manner. And I guess discussions over wastewater treatment and water have kind of shut down. Maybe I think incorporation would, just throw all that, any chance for any of those types of discussions in the future would go away. So those are some of my thoughts.
Okay. Any other board member concerns or comments before we get to the petitioners and interveners? All right, petitioners, what are your comments or points you wish to make?
Kurt, when you were with the league, you were always looking for new members. What's going on here? Anyway, it's interesting to note in this particular area that none of the other neighboring municipalities or the county have raised any objection to this incorporation petition. When you look at this particular issue, yeah, I think the easiest way to analyze it and answer the question is whether the town remains a town or becomes a village. Will there be any change with regard to negative impacts on the metropolitan community? And the answer is no. To Kurt's issues associated with, well, the city raises issues with regard to potential impacts on them. It's in two areas. First, with regard to negotiating new service agreements, the city has those services. To the extent that the PSC does not, get involved and require the continuation of services, whether you're a town or a village, you cannot come to a new agreement unless there's mutual agreement between the parties, and there will have to be. Now, the city has refused to do any negotiation during the pendency of this particular proceeding, which I understand because they don't know if they're going to be dealing with a city or a town, and that, I understand that. In the meantime, they have increased rates for service, which the town has paid, even though there is no new agreement. But bottom line, there will be no difference whether the town of Campbell is the town of Campbell or the village of French Island. That has no impact on the metropolitan community. The only thing that will be impacted, the only thing, is the city's extraterritorial zoning and land division authority. Well, land division will not. Well, I guess it is an issue. We heard from an individual that the town blocked a land division on the whatever basis that he said. So you got those two, and you got annexations, and that's it. Now, is that an impact on the metropolitan community? I don't think that's embraced in this standard. I don't think it is at all involved in the standard. So I think that it will strengthen the ability of the town and the city to ultimately reach agreement because the dust will have been settled. The city will be able to tell the village exactly what they want with regard to provisions, cost for provision of services, and the new village will have to agree or go to the PSC to say that there's unreasonable rates. But bottom line, they'll have to get along. Right now, they don't. So I think it will, as Brad stated, I think it will strengthen the relationship between the city and the town. And if you take into account the entire metropolitan community, the only entity that is in that metropolitan community that's objecting to this is the city, because they desire those two islands, and they've demanded annexations, transfer of territory in order to provide services. And if I were representing them, I'd do the same thing. But I don't think that that's part of the standard. So unless anybody from the town has anything else to add, I believe that covers this particular criteria. I think the staff has laid it out, and I agree with them entirely.
Stan, this is Chief Nate Melby from the Campbell Fire Department. I just wanted to speak on mutual aid.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. So I just wanted to address the notion that the town of Campbell has some sort of unbalanced mutual aid relationship with the city of La Crosse. Although we participate in mutual aid agreements with each other, the mutual aid agreements are actually the same agreements that all of the La Crosse County fire departments participate in. The same agreement, same wording, every agency in the county. And in terms of the frequency of use, the town of Campbell is not afraid to request resources when needed, especially on days where we have very large, significant incidents. The Tie Yard fire has been referenced, but that's also the largest industrial fire in the history of our community. And so you would expect any fire department to use mutual aid on those types of incidents. And whether it's, the town of Campbell or it's another La Crosse County Fire Department, we all collaborate on those days and we share mutual resources. That's why we call it mutual aid, to help each other during those times. It's not an unbalanced approach. In the last several years, there have been a few mutual aid requests that include La Crosse Fire. And I just think it's very important to set the record straight on that. And it's also very similar, whether it's, fire, EMS, or law enforcement. We all use mutual aid to support each other so that we can surge our resources when the situations dictate that. And that's just part of providing a prudent emergency service.
Any other questions for the petitioners board before we move on to intervener comments? All right, intervener comments. So I'm sure you have things that you'd like to add to this. So please, interveners.
Yes, thank you. Again, I believe Kurt asked made some very salient points on this. I first want to address the idea that no other community has intervened in this proceeding. I mean, that is not a surprise, and not for the reasons that the town implies. The proposed village is wholly intertwined with the city of La Crosse. There are no, outside of limited water boundaries on the very north end, there are no municipalities or other townships that connect to the proposed village like the city of La Crosse does. So when there is an issue in the town, it is not necessarily a regional issue. It is not a broader regional issue. It's a regional issue in that it's a city of La Crosse issue. So if the proposed village were to incorporate, it is going to be on the city of La Crosse to pick up the pieces and continue to provide the services and the needs of the town of Campbell first and foremost. Now, fire protection has come up, and the city has made the investment in its community to have a professional level fire department that provides the types of fire protection services that are needed by the city of La Crosse and by the type of urban development that is expected in a metropolitan community and is seen at the southern end, and partly that's seen on the southern end of French Island. Now, the city has done this fire protection. They've invested in their professional fire department, and other communities rely upon that mutual aid to backstop what they're able to provide. And the town, without any sort of condensation or any sort of put down of Mr. Melby, Chief Melby, or the volunteer fire department, it has a volunteer fire department. As the city has pointed out, the county began a study to review how fire protection services are provided in the county. And the town chose not to participate in that study. They're protective of their volunteer fire department, but again, that volunteer fire department is backstopped by the professional fire department that's available 24/7 from the city of La Crosse. From the idea of tax equity, which I think is a very important point that Kurt raised, there is a big equity issue, both with the services that we've already covered that are utilized by the town residents that are within the city and provided by the city, but also the types of services that are hosted in the city. We touched on this in the compact and homogeneous standard, that the major educational, recreational, medical, governmental, county government needs, those are all hosted in the city of La Crosse from tax exempt properties. And those tax exempt properties are supported by city services, the city fire departments, the city streets that the town residents go over to access them, the city police that provide protection for visitors who use that. And that's only funded by city of La Crosse residents. The town does not contribute to that. And the contribution comes through the potential for annexation in the future. Incorporation will remove that potential. And particularly relevant is the idea of the checkerboard pattern on Nokomis, the extreme checkerboard pattern of going from city to town to city to town to city, town that you see on that island. You will have residents next door to each other who utilize the exact same services, who have the exact same needs as one another. And one contributes to the city's support of these services, and one does not and will not with the incorporation. Now, this gets to the idea of service agreements. The town talks about service issues, and unfortunately, as we have shown in our submittals, it is a town that has foreclosed the resolution of these, the holistic discussion of the service issues. The city is, as Attorney Ruffel said, is 100% in the correct mode to ask for and require that we have holistic discussions, that we address these issues with boundaries, we address the issues with services as a combined discussion. But that has not been how it has proceeded. It is the idea that these have to be piecemeal discussed off with the benefit really going only to the town in addressing it in that way. And the ability to negotiate a boundary agreement will be removed with the incorporation. These issues are not going to be addressed. They are going to be locked into place. The confusion of services, the inequity of provision of services, the equity of hosting services are only going to be locked permanently in place by the incorporation. And the city has no expectation that the proposed village will be any more willing to deal with these issues if it was incorporated. In fact, I think we have strong belief that it is going to make the rendering of some of these solutions nigh impossible if they get if they are allowed to incorporate, in spite of their failure to meet many of these standards, all the standards that are before the IRB. So this is a significant issue to the city of La Crosse in the equitable provision and the equitable payment for services that are needed and used by the metropolitan community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Board members, any questions about this standard or any of the other standards before we move on? All right, hearing nothing from the board. This does conclude our analysis and overview of the relevant statutory standards and our analysis of each of those standards. Since we've already had a chance for public comment and responses from the petitioners, interveners, and their representatives, we're going to move on to setting a date and time for our next Incorporation Review Board meeting. I know that Brad sent out a survey to everyone, and at that meeting, we focus on reviewing the draft of the determination findings. The Corporation Review Board will vote on whether or not the Town of Campbell will incorporate as the Village of French Island. And just a reminder, we're doing that because our determination is due 180 days after we receive the petition. So that means our determination and findings are due back to the court on March 27th. So we are looking tentatively at a Thursday, March 19th meeting in the afternoon from 1 to 3. So any discussion on that meeting date or any concerns, let Brad know, but tentatively that's the day. So everyone on the call, look at your calendars, check things out. Let Brad know if that's not going to work. So that's the tentative meeting date. And again, that meeting is going to be to provide feedback on our draft determination document. The copy of that determination document will not be available to the public at that time, but the meeting is open for the public to attend and listen to. We will not be taking comments from the interveners or the petitioners at that meeting. That is a meeting where only the Incorporation Review Board talks. So again, everyone else, that's what that next meeting is for. Everyone else, we will accept written comments, written information to the board following this meeting until March 17th. So you have until, I'm sorry, what?
February 17th. It's
February 17th, darn it.
So,
February
yeah.
17th.
2 weeks.
February 17th.
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today. So that is your last chance to get us written comments, February 17th. So yes, February 17th for written comments to us for inclusion, for our consideration as the staff drafts that determination document. And that can be written comments from petitioners, from interveners, from the public. So anyone who's out there who has comments, please send those. So again, there will be no opportunity for anyone else to speak at that next board meeting. So now that we know that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn from any of the board members.
I will so move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. All right. And before we vote on that, I just remind everyone that Eric's last day before he retires is this Friday. So thank you, Eric, for your years of service to the state of Wisconsin and this Incorporation Review Board. Brad is here to replace you, but we will never forget you. So thank you, Eric, for everything that you've done for us.
Thank you, Eric.
Yes. So thank you. All right. And on that, all those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Abstentions? None. So the Incorporation Review Board is now adjourned at 3:18 on February 3rd. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance.
Thank you.